Welcome to Addressing
to
Doping in Sport by Jess Cross. In this vlog, I'm going to be talking to you about doping in sport, the history of doping, and doping policies, for example, WADA and UK anti-doping. Talk about various health risks involved with doping and also the testing process. We're going to be applying both rational choice theory and situational action theory to performance enhancing drug use and discuss the critiques of these theories. I will also be talking about the ongoing issues within swimming, and we'll talk about the issues regarding Sung Yang's ban and the Chinese doping scandal, and also how national governing bodies are dealing with these issues. Lastly, mentioning the recent discussions regarding the criminalisation of doping in sport. In the past century, the competitive environment of sports has exceeded all other professions and hobbies, one off, if not the most competitive. People naturally desire to rival one another, especially in a competitive field. Some sportsmen may approach this honestly by training harder, longer, and more frequently. However, others attempt to beat those around them by using drugs and other substances. But the only possible explanation for this is that human effort cannot equal the impacts of substance misuse. Interpol 2023 defines doping as consuming artificial and banned or illegal substances to gain an advantage over others in sporting competitions, with WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency, defining doping as the occurrence of one or more of the anti-doping violations. Moving on to the history of doping, and the first known accounts of doping appear to have come from the ancient Olympic Games in the 3rd century BC. According to Philostratus and Galerius, athletes would try to enhance their performance by using hallucinogenic mushrooms and sesame seeds, as well as taking figs, herbal medication, and they would also drink wine. Here is a timeline of the history of doping, starting from 1960 to 2003. In 1960, a Danish cyclist died in the Roman Olympics. Then in 1967, a British cyclist died in the Tour de France. Therefore, in 1967, after pressure to address the doping epidemic in sport, the International Olympic Committee, IOC, created the IOC Medical Commissions. In 1968, the first drug testing at the Olympic Games happened, and in 1988, President Reagan outlawed non-medical steroid sales. Joe Biden in 1989 introduced the Steroid Trafficking Act, and then in 1999, the World Anti-Doping Agency was formed, which is an independent international agency with the aim of protecting athletes, promoting sport, and preserving the spirit of sport. Then in 2003, WADA introduced the World Anti-Doping Code. WADA, which has been mentioned previously, is the World Anti-Doping Agency. Their aim is to develop, harmonise and coordinate anti-doping rules and policies across all sports and countries. Alongside WADA, the UK Anti-Doping Agency is responsible for ensuring sports bodies in the UK are compliant with the World Anti-Doping Code through implementation and management of the UK National Anti-Doping Policy. In recent years, dopers have been utilising significantly more advanced methods, usually using naturally occurring chemicals in the body, like erythropoietin, growth hormones, and testosterone to boost their performance. But it's no surprise that these substances have consequences. There are many health risks to taking performance-enhancing drugs, such as physical risks, which include liver damage, heart attacks, higher risk of having stroke, and all these risks can link to depression, which WADA states in 2023. However, Kezia et al. 2007 suggests that the very nature of elite sport carries health risks to athletes. So critics argue, how is doping any more dangerous than the sport itself? The testing process for doping includes getting a sample of either urine, venous blood, or dry blood. And once a sample is collected, it is sent to a WADA accredited laboratory to be analysed. Reflecting on this testing process, scholars criticise anti-doping policies for being ineffective and too costly. Therefore, Overby et al. States that a need to identify an effective, less costly deterrent, we need to know why and when some athletes do and others refrain from doing so. So why would athletes choose to dope? The first theory which will be discussed is rational choice theory. Rational choice theory can be used to explain why athletes decide to engage in doping behaviour. Newburn 2017 explains rational choice theory as assuming that individuals proceed on the basis of maximising profits and minimising loss, which can also be described as benefits outweighing the costs. Cornish and Clark also suggest that decisions are not always straightforward, and that people's social and psychological situations sometimes have a role in the decision-making they make. Researchers have used this theory in explaining the reasons individuals engage in various aspects of deviant behaviours. This theory helps researchers understand why or when athletes choose to use performance-enhancing drugs, as Higgins 2007 offers that if an athlete recognises that the benefits of doping outweigh the potential costs of taking performance-enhancing drugs, they are more likely to engage in the behaviour. Despite its wide appeal, rational choice theory in criminology has had notable criticism, and looking at Cornish and Clark 1986 explanation of rational choice theory, critics have argued that the theory incorrectly presumes that everyone is capable of rational decision-making. Therefore, O'Grady 2011 points out that scholars have failed to take into account mental disorders, and also research suggests that rational choice considerations can be overridden by emotional arousal. The second theory being applied to doping is situational action theory, which Winkstrom uses to explain deviant behaviours, and recognises that human behaviour is influenced by situational factors. Therefore, acts of criminal or deviant behaviour are affected by situations triggered by external factors. And the idea suggests that morality, deterrence, temptations, and self-control are functioning factors of situational action theory. Through this comprehensive framework, he describes situational action theory by examining crimes as moral actions and as a broad dynamic mechanism-based view of crime and its causes. In addition to the governmental laws, moral rules can be explained as informal guidelines for socially acceptable behaviour like social etiquette. According to Shadman-Fatt 2020, with an applicability to both moral and criminal actions, it makes situational action theory an appropriate theory when thinking about why athletes choose to dope. Sport etiquette is the unwritten/moral rules in sports, and situational action theory utilises an athlete's mortality, deterrence, temptations, and self-control to determine doping behaviour. For example, if an athlete has a high mortality and high self-control, it means they are less likely to engage with performance-enhancing drugs. In her article titled The Nature and Role of Morality and Situational Action Theory, Jennifer Barton Crosby provides a critical examination of situational action theory, arguing that not all criminal acts can be neatly categorized as moral choices, and the misinterpretations and assumptions of human nature are the drawbacks to Wingstrom's situational action theory. Case examples of doping in swimming.
In the clear for Paris 2024, so he could make a comeback in France. We could speculate for hours about who is and who is not doping, who's doping on purpose and who isn't. There are tons of other doping allegations out there, but honestly, in some cases, we'll just never know the full truth. We just have to hope that athletes want to compete clean, and they have to follow through on that promise. To keep athletes accountable to their commitment,
banned from swimming for 8 years.
Anti-doping.
Doping.
Anti-doping rule violation.
Although swimming is not the first sport you would think about when it comes to the use of performance-enhancing drugs, however, there are many past and present swimmers around the world who have been involved with doping. Some examples of swimmers who have been suspended or banned from the sport were in the previous video. For example, Sun Yang, Ryan Lochte, and Yulia Efimova have been caught taking performance-enhancing drugs in the past and have or are currently serving bans or suspensions. A big story within the swimming community is Sun Yang and the Chinese doping scandal. Sun Yang is a Chinese national and international swimmer. He is a 3-time Olympic champion and 11-time world champion. In 2014, Yang tested positive for a banned substance, trimetazine, which meant he was suspended from the sport. However, due to a change in classification of the stimulant, the Chinese stopped his suspension. 4 years later, however, in September 2018, Yang refused to cooperate with the sample testers, which then led to an 8-year ban from the sport. This was because his second offence after his 2014 suspension. The Chinese doping scandal is a recent event, And with less than 12 weeks until the swimming competition begins at the 2024 Olympics in Paris, an issue has renewed questions of transparency and policing doping and sparked a war of words between major governing agencies. On the 20th of April 2021, it was revealed that 23 Chinese athletes tested positive for trimetazine, with some of these athletes going on to medal at the Tokyo Olympics. These swimmers were allowed to compete after WADA accepted Chinese findings that suggested the Chinese swimmers unwillingly ingested the substance from food they ate at a hotel. Reflecting on this scandal, national governing body Aquatics GB responded with a post on Instagram stating that they are extremely concerned by the allegations concerning positive tests in the build-ups to the Tokyo 2024 Games. They will be monitoring further updates and possible resolutions closely. This statement was released to ensure swimmers in the UK that they are fully supportive of keeping the sport clean. Is it necessary for the government to implement new laws to combat doping in sports, including the establishment of a particular criminal offence for doping in sports in the UK? This new debate has sparked controversy in the UK, and it is argued that current anti-doping measures are not effective in reducing doping among athletes. In their review of criminalisation of doping in sport, GovUK 2017 proposed that criminalising doping in sports would be counterproductive in the fight against doping in sports. This is because athletes may get stigmatised and face lasting negative publicity, as well as the public's opinion of athletes may change from admiration to scepticism. Therefore, GovUK proposes that in order to combat doping, more efficient liaisons between UK anti-doping, appropriate law enforcement agencies and sport governing bodies are needed rather than criminalisation of doping. In this vlog, the definition of doping was defined. I talked about the history of doping and discussed anti-doping policies, as well as the health risks involved with doping. 2 criminological theories were applied. Both rational choice theory and situational action theory were used to help explain doping, whilst also criticising these theories. I addressed the ongoing issues in swimming, including Sun Yang's ban and the Chinese doping scandal, and how national governing bodies dealt with these issues. And lastly, mentioning the recent discussions regarding the criminalisation of doping in the UK. Thank you for watching.